Welcome everybody, my name is Simon Hamm. I'm the CEO of both, fortunate to be the CEO of both Deakin Prime and DeakinDigital, and pleased to host today's event on leadership in an age of digital disruption. For over 25 years, Deakin Prime has worked with organisations to assist with the professional development of their workforces. In more recent times, that's been through embedding or through embracing and leading the latest thinking on blended design approaches encompassing design thinking in the 70-20 framework. And what we've seen there is a shift from learning outcomes to focusing on people performance outcomes, which we think is transforming the effectiveness of professional development. DeakinDigital is much younger, an exciting newcomer to the Deakin family, offers a unique new approach to measuring and recognising the capability of people in the workforce. Provides organisations with visibility across the capability of their workforce. Has always been the holy grail of organisational development, to be able to make more insightful, data-driven decisions around recruitment, around professional development and training and workforce planning by having information that's independently verified. We think it's a game changer, and we're going to share some of that with you today. Today's theme addresses what I believe is probably the most fundamental challenge businesses facing today, and that challenge, I believe, is shaped or brought to life by looking at two really big issues. The first is the impact of digital disruption and leadership readiness. Look, this is fairly widely supported by a whole range of reports. I'll use the Accenture's recent one on digital disruption, which said 82% of organisations expect to be digital businesses within the next 3 years. But the biggest challenge they've identified is that they don't have the right leadership capability to make sure their workforce is ready to realise the benefits of being digital. And that's the challenge. I think that's pretty widely accepted. The second issue, and it's again a pretty well researched review, and the one I always look at is the McKinsey report, that says that over 70% of leadership development programs fail to deliver the desired sustained behavioural change the organisation was seeking, and that's a massive number. So if you bring those two issues together, we haven't been particularly effective in developing the leaders we required in the old world, if you like, or traditionally developing, and we've now got a whole new approach and requirements for leadership development in the digital age. So it doesn't bode well, but never fear. We've assembled an expert panel today. They're going to provide us with some pathways around success in navigating this challenge. So the format for today is our four panellists will come up and speak, and then there'll be some questions afterwards. So we have Nigel Payne, who's going to share his findings from his soon-to-be-released book on the critical elements of what successful leadership development programs require. Dr. Marcus Bowles has shown to identify leadership capability required for jobs of the future and provide the first look at DeakinDigital's lead credentials, which we're really excited to present to you today. Kelly Kieski, who will share an overview of an example of a leadership development program designed to address the challenges of developing leaders in the digital age. And Dr. Marcel De Sanctis, who will provide a psychological perspective on effective leadership development and assessment. There will be opportunities for questions at the end, but we'll kick off. We've got lots to cover, and starting with a presentation from Nigel. So I will introduce the panellists as they come up to speak. So starting with Nigel, who was appointed in 2002 to head up the BBC's training and development operation, where he built one of the most successful learning and development operations in the UK. This included an award-winning leadership program, state-of-the-art informal learning, e-learning and knowledge sharing, and one of the most outstanding and well-used intranets in the corporate sector. Nigel left the BBC in September 2006 to start his own company, which focuses on leadership, creativity, innovation and e-learning. He works with companies in Europe, Brazil, Australia and the US. He is an academic director and member of the International Advisory Board at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia on a Learning Leaders doctoral program. Nigel focuses on the use of learning technologies, organisation development, leadership and creativity with a spotlight on maximising human potential, innovation and performance in the workplace. Nigel is about to release his, what number book is this, Nigel? His fifth book, which is called Building Leadership Development Programs. So can you please welcome Nigel to the stage.
Thank you, Simon. And this is an unbelievably important topic. And I wrote my book because of that, in a way. Because we're living in a different kind of age. Because we're living in a different kind of age where pressures on leaders are unprecedented. And yet, I think leadership development couldn't be more at a cusp of failure, discontent, a feeling that it's a waste of money, that there are a number of people eating well off the back of failed leadership, etc., etc., etc. So that was the genesis of the book. And if I can, what's happening here? It says log in, Georgie. So let me keep talking. What I wanted to do in the book is try to reassure people that leadership development isn't a waste of time and a waste of money, but at the same time, not join the bunch who say, hey, we just do it and it doesn't really matter, and just a focus on leaders, you'll get some benefit from that, come what may, regardless. I wanted to focus almost with a scalpel on the factors that make leadership development successful and the factors that don't. So, this is my backdrop. I don't know if anyone's seen these two books. Pfeffer's book, Leadership Bullshit, it basically says, and Pfeffer is a very well-respected Stanford professor. Pfeffer is saying the whole market is corrupt, the whole thing is a total disaster, it's all bullshit. And then he says at the end, now what you need to do to fix it, I waited with bated breath, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And then Kellerman, The End of Leadership, she's written a whole bunch of books which are basically, leadership is a disaster, I hate leadership, these people are charlatans, and this is the final one, The End of Leadership. And again, Kellerman says in the last paragraph, there is a topic about how we rebuild leadership development, and that is the subject of another book. So that's not helpful, because, let me just go, this is what you get. My friend Donald Clark, I like Donald, he's a good thinker, but what does he say? Leadership is a Ponzi scheme. And he's basically saying, not only has the leadership industry empirically failed with study after study of workplace discontent, it also contributes to that failure. In other words, leadership is actually doing damage, it's not even neutral. So these things begin to upset me, and I'm thinking, I have seen leadership work. I've seen individuals and companies transform. So it can't all be bad news. And this was a very helpful research publication by the CRF. Leadership development, is it fit for purpose? And the answer is no, it isn't. But it does give the beginnings of hints about what you need to do to put it right. And that's what I focused on, what you need to do to put it right. And there's the book there. The cover exists, the book not yet. It's at proof stage. So it is a book, but it's not yet published. It's coming out next month. But it's got a lovely red cover, and I just want to reinforce the fact the book actually exists virtually, and it will exist really soon. Here are some conclusions, just a handful of conclusions, and then I'll stop and hand over to Marcus. The first thing is, context is much more important than models. And all these people who peddle, it has to be authentic leadership, resonant leadership, servant leadership, whatever leadership, are talking rubbish. You can have a brilliant model and a terrible implementation, you're wasting your money. You can have a not so successful model and a brilliant implementation, and it resonates. So context. Taking someone out of your organization and sending them to Harvard for 4 weeks for $50,000 is fun and interesting, and that person will have a great time. Leadership out of context, the chances of them doing anything useful with that when they get back are very slight. Very, very slight indeed. Context is everything. I think that the focus should be on leadership, not leaders. And when you focus on leadership, you focus on the whole organization. And to say these 4 people, they're the crux, they're the ones, and we'll put everything into those people and not look at leadership across the organization. And the experience of leadership across the organization is naive, at the very least, it's naive. Now, if you look at that recent report by, am I allowed to mention Melbourne University? Okay, Melbourne University, when they did a survey of leadership in Australia, for every $10 spent on top leaders in organizations, less than $1 is spent on everyone else. And that has to be wrong. You can't have an engaged 15 and a totally dislocated, unhappy, miserable 150,000. You've got to have some balance. And what I say to organizations is, you need to understand how leadership is experienced in your organisation, and you have to face it down. And many CEOs don't want to know that kind of truth because it's unpleasant. It's much easier to say, bring in a 2-week course, get it in there. And I was in Sydney yesterday, and this female, the head of HR, said, what am I going to do, Nigel? My CEO says, we need leadership, and we're a fast-acting company. You've got to do it in a month, and we need 2 weeks of process for these top 40 people. We'll solve it. And she's saying, it's not going to work, is it? And I said, no, it's going to be a disaster. And she said, but my CEO says, we do things fast in this company. What do I say? How do I do it? Because what she needs to really say to the CEOs, we need to understand what is going on in this organisation, what leadership really means to the person at the front line, someone in middle management, as well as the senior leadership, and plan accordingly. And she's not going to be given a chance to do that. So you've really got to face it down, think it through. The next one is line manager involvement. If the line manager is disinterested or actively anti a leadership program, kiss it goodbye. It's the single most critical factor. And if you look at people like Brinkhoff's research shows that if the line manager sits down with the individual and helps them action plan what they want to get out of the leadership program, and then helps them implement their own action plan that they've created, not over 3 days, but over 6 or 8 months, the impact is 70% greater than if you don't do that. And that's kind of for nothing. How much does that cost? A bit of time. But you need the active and continued commitment of the line manager if it's going to work. And you need a CEO who can be patient. Because this is a 1-year journey or a 10-month journey. It's not a 2-week journey. You are changing people's behaviour, and all of you know how difficult it is to change behaviour. Everybody knows to quit smoking is really hard. To start exercising is really hard. To give up chips is really hard. And yet, we assume that something is infinitely more embedded in our brains. The habit of leadership can be done in a week. It's equally difficult. You are changing habits. You are changing worldviews. You are changing assumptions about reality. And that is always a challenge. But you can do it. You can absolutely do it, but you need patience, and you need to stick at it, and you need to modify behaviour again and again and again until it becomes habitual. And at the point where it's habitual, you've achieved something. And if leadership is not part of work, forget it. You've got to be able to implement everything in work, in the real world, in the workflow as soon as possible. Now, if you look at Charles Jennings, who's been here, who's talked to Deakin Prime in his 70-20-10 model, he subtly changed 70 from social learning or informal learning or whatever it's called. He now calls it learning at work and learning as work. So you need to integrate learning. Therefore, you need to plan that. If someone comes off a leadership program, they need to have a practice. They need to embed the learning in their workflow. And that needs to be a massive part of the learning. And to ignore that, as so many programs do. Come and be an authentic leader in 2 weeks. You'll be absolutely transformed. You'll have an interesting time. You'll learn a few concepts. You are not going to be transformed. Transformation takes time, and it's slow, and it's important that it takes time and it's slow. And then finally, it is about the individual, clearly, but it's not only about the individual. Back to leadership and leaders. It's about the organisation. You need to, you measure leadership by looking at the change that has taken place in the organisation. Not at how much an individual says, yes, I'm transformed. You ask people if things have changed around here. What do you experience day to day that's different? And if the answer is absolutely nothing, your leadership program has failed. You have to change the organisation, the way people perceive it, and therefore you build their engagement and their participation, and then you start getting not just the benefits of good leadership, but you get the benefits of engaged workforce, higher productivity, a belief that the organisation knows what it's doing. And for most staff, leadership development is a very cynical, oh yeah, they would fly off to some remote resort or fly off to some other country and have a great time, so much for us. That's the general attitude of deep cynicism and a feeling that it's just a way of spending money on the people who get lots of money spent on them anyway. A few more conclusions and I'm going to wind up. I believe very, very strongly that leaders need protection. They're out there in this volatile, uncertain, disruptive world, having to make decisions about things where they don't know the answer. And where you end up with not just uncertainty, but Mervyn King, who's the chairman of the Bank of England through the GFC, Mervyn's book is really interesting. It's called The End of Alchemy. And alchemy was the belief that you could literally make money out of nothing, very much like the alchemists of the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. And Mervyn King says it's not uncertainty now we're in, it's radical uncertainty. So I've changed it from VUCA to VUCA, because that's even more unpleasant than VUCA. So it's a VUCA world. And the radical uncertainty is where you can't simply analyse the risks, work out the options, and take the best decision, because you have no idea what you're doing. So how do you lead when you don't have the answers? And how do you lead when perhaps the answers lie in the front line, people that you have hardly talked to in the last 15 years? So it's a complete re-engineering of the organisation and the way knowledge is transferred and the way you make decisions. So this is really serious stuff, and you need to protect leaders. And what is clear from some of the research that is now emerging is that teaching people to reflect, and you say, oh, everyone knows how to reflect. Oh, no, they don't. You talk to senior people in companies and ask how much time in a week they spend reflecting. The answer is less than 3 seconds. Mostly. You teach people to consciously reflect, and you teach them mindfulness. You teach them how to be in the moment, how to focus on the real issues, how to cut out the distractions of part of their week. And one of my PhD students in the University of Pennsylvania, his research is on mindfulness in senior leaders. And what he's discovered, remarkably, is that mindfulness isn't something where you need to go to a Buddhist monastery for 6 months and practice an hour and a half a day. He's saying, it seems clear from his research evidence, although the thesis isn't out yet, hasn't been approved yet, he's saying that 3 minutes can make a big difference in people's psychological well-being. 3 minutes. So you need to teach people to protect themselves, how they arm themselves against hostility, against the kind of conflict, and just purely against radical uncertainty. And we don't do enough of that. So if you want content, I think that's one thing you have to do. Secondly, co-creation. There's no reason now, in this world where everything is out there, that you do something to people. And if the group that you're working with aren't interested, just do it to me, then you've got the wrong group or it's the wrong time. Co-creation. Bring them in. Get them to agree the process. Get them to understand the logic behind it and not just throw content at them. In some ways, content is the least important thing. It's much more important to talk. It's much more important to face down challenges than it is to get content. And content is everywhere. One of the chapters in my book is called DIY Leadership, i.e. zero cost. And you can do amazing things with no budget if you approach it properly, just as you can do amazing things with $5 million budget. And I'm not saying that everything has to be zero cost. I think sometimes it's really well worth investing in people in a big way. Like, I was working with a Saudi Arabian company. They took 150 senior leaders in gobbets, in groups, to Shanghai to work with Chinese enterprise companies, new enterprise companies. And that cost a fortune, but it just opened people's eyes to a completely different way of working and a new world emerging. So that I would say that was worth every penny because it was done in the context of a very good leadership program. And ultimately, self-development. You want leaders who get it, who spend time in their life on their own development and don't sit back and say, well, you didn't develop me, it's not my fault, I'm a completely useless bully. You've got to get people taking responsibility. And the best way is to come out of a leadership program that leads automatically into self-development. How am I doing? I'm just about to finish. The last 2 points. If you have a leadership program where there are no consequences of non-compliance, if you happen out of 10 to just carry on the same old way because you don't care and you don't believe in it anyway, and no one does anything, you might as well write off the impact the other 9 will make. Because people look at it and go, hey, what do they do? hey, I thought you said we were going to do it this way. This person isn't doing it. And the problem is that the non-compliance is often right at the top. It's the senior people who feel they're going to walk on water. And my belief is that the hard side of what I'm saying is you have to deal with that. There is no room for non-compliance. And you hunt it down. And you say to people, you aren't prepared to follow this through. You aren't prepared to behave in the way that we have determined is the only way we're going to survive. You're out of here. And there have to be consequences, whether it's the number 2 in the company or wherever they happen to be. And in most leadership programs, there is no punishment for non-compliance. No one cares. And you've got to start caring. And you've got to start being serious about it. And you've got to start hunting down the changes that you want to see. And if you, as a leadership executive, don't really notice, absolutely, the people in the middle and the bottom of your company will notice every single twitch. They see whether it works or not. And if they see it working, you have a whole new agenda of communication and discussion, and I think productivity increases. And just my point about no instant fixes. This is a long-term engagement, and possibly a never-ending engagement with making leadership better. And any leader who thinks, I'm done, hey, I can process, is naive in the extreme. It's a long journey, and it's a hard journey, but it's probably the most important journey that any organisation can sort out. If you can fix leadership, you fix so much that's rotten in many of our organisations, in Australia as elsewhere. And you know, I could have opened my session by saying, talk amongst yourself, give us some examples of appalling leadership. Every single one of you wouldn't stop talking for 15 minutes. We all have experienced appalling leadership, and it's unnecessary. We can do better, and that's my agenda, do better. So, last point I want to make is McKinsey. McKinsey came up with, they interviewed 189,000 leaders in 81 countries. And they said there are 4 key skills for leaders that are across all those countries. And these are them. Essentially, be supportive of your workforce. Be strong, have a strong results orientation. Seek different perspectives. Diversity is critical. Have other views than yours and all the people who agree with you. And face those down. Solve problems effectively. And if you want to spend $150,000 on working out the skills people need, start there. Start there. And then you've got Marx's brilliant framework to flesh that out into a program where you work out the key weaknesses and you've got an agenda that you can work on. And that's all I've got to say. So thanks very much for listening. I'm sorry about the darkness. It was a metaphorical darkness.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's plenty of questions, so please save them up for the end. We'll move straight to the next presentation from Dr. Marcus Files and Marcel DeSantis. Marcus is the Director and Chair of the Institute for Working Futures and a strategic consultant to DeakinDigital, assisting DeakinDigital to establish the world-first micro-credential framework by offering global professional capability standards. His main focus is on building the people and strategic capability required to achieve desired futures, and has contributed to the shape of national, vocational and industry training systems and technologies in Australia and overseas. In addition to consulting with a broad range of corporates, Dr. Bowles is also a Professor Adjunct at the Centre for Regional and Rural Futures for Deakin University. Joining him will be Dr. Marcel DeSantis. Marcel is the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of the Centre for Leadership Advantage, a consultancy providing psychological products and services for leadership. Marcel is a registered organisational psychologist and has extensive experience working across a range of corporate and government clients. Developing leadership assessment and development and high-performing team dynamics, executive search and recruitment. Marcel is a research supervisor and examiner for the Master of Organisational Psychology program at DeakinDigital and supports the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So welcome up Marcus and Marcel.
I'm going to try to do something really difficult. I'm going to try and do 2 things at once, which is control the microphone. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. So, in terms of the presentation moving forward, what I'd like to do is just go through the lead credentials and then lead into evidence-based assessment and really then link into Marcel's area in terms of what we need in terms of rich evidence. So this is going to be a little bit of a journey, because when I said the brief to me was explain what they are, why we need them, and how we use them, and you've got 10 minutes. So as I said, it's going to be a quick journey, and I just want to go through a few things first. The first thing I want to do is put a context together, and of course everything Nigel said and everything we're moving through and what we're doing at the moment and how we're moving through it, there is a number of factors that are actually occurring that we seem to put in the back of our head and keep forgetting. Everyone says they know it, but I just want to make sure that we all know it. The first thing and most important thing is that we're in the fourth machine age. Whatever you want to call it, we're in the digital age. We're moving through waves of change that are getting more rapid. We're moving through a cycle where, at the moment, if you're looking at everything, I could have put up 20 reports that have come out in the last 3 months that all of us would read that say, we've got shelf life of 2.5 years for the most fundamental core skills of our organisation. We have 40% of our workforce who will not be in the jobs they think they're going to have in this workplace in the next 5, 10 years, so on, etc. It's all doom and gloom, and it's all about profit. The issue for us is that this slide is 10 years old. We knew this was happening. We knew a slide that I actually presented in a room just down the hall 4 years ago with Marcel, and you probably may not remember that, but we were doing a leadership in the digital age. And some research that we'd done that talked about the difference between industrial age leaders and focusing on leadership development, and really some of the things that we're starting to talk about, is that we have some pretty false assumptions up there. We want stability, we want process control, we want efficiency, we want great skills. Tailored equals performance plus competency. All of these tried and true things that we think are absolutes. Actually, when we start to think about it, when we move forward and start to look at digital age leaders, we're talking about strategic agility. We're talking about competitiveness not being what our competitors are doing in our position to them, but our proximity to our market. How well are we doing as opposed to where we need to be? It's about intelligence. It's about the intellectual horsepower as well as the courage to make decisions that you normally wouldn't have to make. And I'm not going to repeat the same sort of messages that Nigel just hammered home as well. You cannot expect, in terms of a digital age leadership and where we're moving forward into the future, to have industrial age concepts if you're trying to be a digital age company. And I'll say it again. We're not saying, and I'm not saying, that industrial age and the slower to move organisations and leadership programs aren't appropriate for certain organisations. But for most of us, they're not appropriate. We're moving ahead, we have different things that we're trying to achieve. Okay, so that's some of the background. So what were the solutions we started talking about at least 20 years ago in my history? I'm getting very old now. I was reminded how old I was because I sat in a briefing session yesterday in a workshop in Sydney as well with engineers from the public sector of New South Wales talking about leadership capabilities. And I had to have a discussion with a senior manager who said capabilities are the same things as competencies. And I have a manual of competencies for leaders that everyone ignores. I thought, gee, that sounds like a conversation I had 20 years ago. I won't go into more detail except to say, let's step outside the system and look at what we joined together to do a little over 3 years ago. And I'll stitch it together. But in terms of the credentials and the practices that we're looking at, credentials, micro-credentials, are effectively recognising the skills and knowledge and experiences an individual has. It's an outcome. The macro-credential is the qualification. The micro-credential is about applied expertise. It's about recognising and understanding your personal value. It isn't a sheep dip. It's about the capabilities we need in the workforce of the future, identifying them where they're present in individuals, and making sure the individual has a profile of capabilities that can be credentialed through micro-credentials that represent true value for that individual in an employment or in a workplace setting. Heavily nuanced, lots of words there. Let me flesh it out a little bit more. We set up a set of core credentials. And these slide packs, I know this is not a very good screen, this slide pack will be available to you. We're talking about self-management, professional ethics, problem-solving, global citizenship. Won't go into all the details. And then the leadership ones. And then the professional expertise, the technical streams, where we're working with companies such as the Association for Data-Driven Marketing, who've never had a formal qualification for their industry. It's moving too expletive fast. They run their own programs, they run them in-house. They have experts coming and training each other's companies. They get the education and the learning they need to keep ahead of the curve, and have never had an opportunity to have that recognised, never had a line in the sand for the value of that. We're working in areas where there's consistently been multiple approaches and multiple different languages, but no consistent international credential that recognises, for instance, project management. We're agnostic to how you get there, but we're setting standards that are called capabilities that set an expectation for what you should be able to do at a level of work with the right skills and knowledge and experience. We've anchored the credentials in the middle to the Australian qualifications framework. This is a bit of technical stuff for those who want to know. That means they can sit in any international qualifications framework. They are now, from a qualifications point of view, incredibly portable. Fortunately in Australia, we have a fantastic Australian qualifications framework. I should declare a vested interest in that, and also the fact that I got sacked from that when I did first consultancy to write it, but I just suggested that maybe the university and the vocational wasn't in the same one stream, and I was told it's a given, but anyway. We can now move the credentials across any qualifications framework and recognise it anywhere in the world. In the first instance, though, the most important breakthrough is Deakin University has recognised them. And then we've got levels of leadership development. We can fit against anyone's concept of a competency framework or a model they're using or how they're levelling their organisation's leaders. We can level it to any professional association. Example there are Engineers Australia. They come in with how they recognise status. The credentials can then attribute to professional status. They can contribute to a qualification. Oh my God, we could have our senior executive engineer leaders exit a program with credentials recognising their applied expertise, which we've never been able to do before, and give them a master's. We can set up the program so that we can look at the key transition points, so that we can not only get the leadership program looking at things, for instance, like, not working, the core capabilities, and then the leadership capabilities that grow as we move up, but also the professional technical capabilities that shrink as we go up the ladder. Funnily enough, that then allows us to actually do predictive analysis. We are now have part of the organisation at DeakinDigital looking at jobs of the future and predicting the frameworks that will actually profile them. We're starting to be able to forecast the types of leadership mix with professional expertise, with the core capabilities required in certain emerging industries. It's really exciting stuff. And it's because we've started to get a really clear idea about not only the traditional models of leadership transition, but how the jobs are changing and the mix of capabilities are changing. I know this is lots of stuff to take in. As I said, it'll be a quick journey. So the lead credentials, what are they? We're looking at 4 aspects, and completely unbeknown to us when we started this journey 3 years ago, but aligned to some major international research, including knowledge. The 4 key areas that we're looking at in the leadership credentials across the 5 levels of progression are lead and develop people. Being able to create a vision and inspire and get people to move towards a direction. Aligning purpose. Developing people so that you're doing it in a context that is culturally aligned and values-based to your organisation. Empowering others, engaging with others, creating collaborative relationships, co-creating as it was called. Understanding that leadership isn't something that starts with the old great man theory at the top of a certain point in time when you've gone past the point where you're an expert, you need to lead a team and then move up a ladder. It starts from day one. Side-by-side leadership models. The leadership capabilities are coming out in job profiles at all levels. Adapt and change. You don't sit still. You've got to continuously innovate. You You've got to move forward. You've got to solve problems you never knew you had. And you've got to focus on driving strategic results. If you like business benefits, if you like, what did the customer actually want? I won't go through all of those definitions, but effectively I just summarise them. A lot more of detail there. And all of these are available on DeakinDigital.com and some of the definitions there. So in terms of why do we get there, how do you implement these things? I came out of a project where there was a $14 million bucket of money thrown at what ended up being Melbourne University. That generated some very interesting research about 3 years later about leaders and what their framework should be. And I was working with a fabulous chap who's been doing a number of the executive frameworks across Australia in the leadership programs, who's now the chair actually of the Centre for Leadership Advantage, Terry Coyne. And when we put it together, for the first time I bought all my frameworks, which was, I'd done 12 leadership frameworks in probably the top 30, 12 of the top 30 organisations. I'm not saying that, oh geez, I'm good. Most of those were really bad and they failed for all the reasons we've heard. But when we were putting the frameworks together, we're starting from scratch, because the ones that were there were very expensive and didn't work. And ours worked as long as someone else that thought they had a better framework or had a particular vendor they wanted to use were actually in place, and we were very successful. What we did is we went through the frameworks and did data analysis and came up with 12 capabilities. Much smarter people than me have the ability now to analyse data to the nth degree. And there's amazing algorithms, and in a research paper that I put together with a couple of other people, we went through 10 frameworks I'd written and then benchmarked them against 10 frameworks that Terry had. And in the Australian New Zealand context, we actually came up with 12 capabilities, different language, different descriptors, different levelling. These were the 12 that were marking the difference between organisations that were static, if you like, the traditional, slow to change organisations, and the organisations that were more dynamic and moving into the digital age. If you like, the ones that were actually growing and the ones which were stagnating. When we did this work in 2013, the beginnings of the core credentials in DeakinDigital were just starting to emerge. By 2014, I stopped everything I was doing on the corporate consulting side and threw everything behind DeakinDigital. Because everything in their framework, including the core framework, was dealing with all of the core capabilities I needed for my corporate clients. It's not just lead, it's the other credentials as well that are essential for leaders of the future. And if you're developing the core credentials across your whole workforce, you're developing potential leaders of the future as well. The other major motivation for doing this that you might be interested in, certainly a number of my clients are, is publicly funded university qualifications, $37.5 billion spent. Everyone happy inside the tent getting qualifications, and I won't go into detail. I've probably got an embargo about talking about universities and responsiveness and things like that, but that's why it took me 2 years to get the leadership framework. No. Outside the tent, we have a $33.7 billion spend on the most conservative estimate, $20 billion of which is dealing with leadership or leadership compliance issues in Australia. Credentials allow us to bring everything outside the tent inside the tent. We can recognise the programs that have been put together in your workplaces, in your context, for your needs, with your frameworks and your roles and your levelling and however you're doing it. We're interested in the outcome. If we can see the credentials, the capabilities for workplaces of the future in place, Deakin University, for instance, in this model allows us now to package, and this is just one example, a Master's of Professional Practice of Leadership, where a client needed their program put inside. We identified in the future it will be 12 credentials. 12 credentials, your program, your process, we agree on the evidence. We go through the credential assessment process with all that evidence in there. The university puts a bookend. What is this learning process about? Can you build a portfolio? Can we recognise what you've already got? What is your learning plan? What are you trying to get out of this? And what's the most important project at the end where all of this is going to be brought together that the company wants you to deliver? A capstone project worth 2 units. Enroll in the Masters, complete the units, start anytime, anywhere on the cloud, get your credentials through your internal processes where you're developing the evidence, and the person's completing an internal program to your needs, and we end up with a master's. We've uncoupled all of the arguments about articulation, credit transfer, whether you're doing the right assessment for what we need. The credentials is the process that allows the university to know the standard's been achieved and the evidence is applied, and it's about applied expertise, not just learning. We can bundle particular credentials together and can't be able to deliver particular agendas within a company at different levels of the organisation. So one organisation wanted to do a change program. Same credentials, different levels of progression. Important about credentials is we're independently verifying that the capability has been attained. You might think you're doing a great program, but we actually want to hold it accountable. One of the most important things that's coming out of Nigel's conversation. We are completely independent. We are looking for the evidence the individual can do what you say they can do. We collect the evidence against these things that are going on, and if it's a business outcome, or it's a particular thing, so if we're looking at a change in innovation at a high level, it might be a change strategy. We then actually have, it's backed into a qualification, an academic panel member and an industry expert, who both then review the evidence and do an interview with that individual. They then need to know that the person can not only do what they say they can do, they can actually reflect on what they're doing and actually self-examine what worked and what didn't work, and convince them that they actually know not just what it's about, but how they would do it better in the future. Reflection. Incredibly deep, incredibly important. And before I switch over to myself, so what we're doing here is we've created a credential system against leadership areas that are backed by other core credentials. It is evidence-based. The breakthrough for me after 20 years of trying to get this right is the conversation with the university no longer is about whether it's worthy to be recognised what we're doing in our own organisation to get the maximum that we need outside the tent. The conversation now is, have you got evidence that actually works? Is this individual actually using the skills and knowledge to achieve an outcome you value? Because if you value it, that is evidence for us that it's authentic and is achieving a standard of performance that is international and able to be moved between different organisations, different employers, and more importantly, anywhere in the globe. This isn't just Australia. The conversation with DeakinDigital at the moment is global. Our initial partners with Cisco and others and IBM, they're global. It started global. We're fortunate that we can just do it here locally first. All right, so in talking about evidence-based assessment and the ways that you get there, it's very important to understand that we're not saying we are the assessors. We're the credential. We want to know that the evidence is there and we work with you to get that. But there's other ways to get there, and it's important there's a conversation about that.
Hi everyone. Nice to see you all and to see some familiar faces as well. So as Simon and Marcus shared, I'm the CEO of a company called the Centre for Leadership Advantage. My business partner is a gentleman called Terry Coyne, who built a very successful consulting business in a leadership assessment and development domain around about the late 90s, and that was acquired by a large US firm. And we buddied up about a year or so ago to really go to market and build a consulting company that was very much about evidence-based assessment and development for leadership. So whereas, as Terry likes to call us, an old young startup, and we have a team of organisational psychologists, scientists, practitioners, who come together and design a range of leadership assessment programs, development programs, and deliver psychometric assessment services to a variety of clients. Essentially, our purpose is coming very much from an evidence-based angle, a scientist practitioner angle. We feel that as org psychs, it's really important to be independent and to approach our clients' solutions very much from an angle of going out there in the world, looking at exactly what's being done in an evidence-based way, and be able to pull those solutions together through that scientist practitioner lens to ultimately de-risk investment and decision-making around talent and leadership. And it's de-risking that because there's data to work with to ultimately make those decisions around how we're going to develop people, who we're going to develop, do we have the data around where we should ultimately be investing that leadership dollar. And so ultimately our purpose is to assure our clients that every decision and investment they make is valid, reliable and supported by scientific rigour. In terms of how the relationship with Deakin came around, I've studied there my whole life and I'm currently an examiner and supervisor for the Masters of Organisational Psych program. And we essentially have formed a relationship with DeakinDigital to provide the assessment services for applicants, participants who are ultimately taking part in the Leadership Credential program. And so the way that looks is in a variety of ways. So one of our key service offerings is around leadership assessment and insights. And through that service offering, we do things like partnering with large, medium-sized, ASX-listed private sector government organisations to essentially design an environment, design a methodology through which objective data can be collected on leadership potential. And that then gives the organisation really good, rigorous, valid and reliable insights around leadership potential. So we'll create environments like day in the life assessment centres where we replicate the day in the life of a senior leader. We create interview scenarios, simulations, role plays. We utilise psychometric assessments, multiracial 360-degree tools, and we pull together from our very comprehensive library a really robust method and program through which we're ultimately generating insights around leadership potential. And creating that methodology is essentially what we are doing with DeakinDigital to be able to validly assess the degree to which someone completing lead has addressed all of those behavioural competencies that we want to see to then ultimately award them that credential. And that's really important for us and for DeakinDigital in partnering to create a very robust assessment process, because ultimately the value of the credential and of that currency will be determined by the degree to which someone is stretched to demonstrate that capability and ultimately how it's used. And so that value is really important for us to create and to do that in a very valid and reliable way. A couple of other points I'd just like to make around the value of assessment and why we're ultimately partnering here is that I'd argue that leadership effectiveness is very much in the eye of the beholder, and perception is reality, if you like. So as we're creating the methodologies around assessment for lead, it's really important that we think about the dyadic process in which leadership is occurring. It's not occurring in a vacuum. The effectiveness of a leader is ultimately going to be determined by everybody else that they're influencing. Direct reports, customers, suppliers, peers in an organisation. And so bringing that kind of thinking to the assessment process is really important to be able to say that any assessment that we do to ultimately award that leadership credential absolutely picks up on that context and ultimately will verify, if you like, the degree to which someone is likely to be effective in a leadership role. So on that note, I'll hand over to Simon. Thank you.
Last, by certainly no means least, Kelly Kieski, and Kelly's been given the challenge of 5 minutes as compared to others. So, but Kelly's a senior learning consultant at Deakin Prime with experience in consulting and education environments both in Australia and internationally. Specialises in developing leadership capability and workforce development initiatives, and since joining Deakin Prime in 2008 has been responsible for developing programs for clients in Australia, China, India and Bahrain. Kelly is the author of Deakin Prime's influential white paper Demystifying 7 in 2010, drawing from leading corporations and thought leaders, and this continues to be a resource which is referenced and acknowledged internationally by organisations embracing experiential and social learning. Kelly is the leader of Deakin Prime's new enterprise leadership program. Thank you.
morning everyone, as Simon said, I'm Kelly, I'm a Senior Learning Designer at Deakin Prime. I'd like to take just 5 minutes of your time to walk through our Enterprise Leadership Program, which is very much aligned to the research of both Nigel and Marcus, and you'll be able to see those alignments. So what we know is that disruption is changing things. We know that it's changing markets, changing business structures, and it's certainly changing the skills that leaders need to be successful both now and into the future. We know that disruption is not just continuing, it's accelerating, and it has caught a number of organisations, including learning organisations, a bit short. So what we know is that we need to build leaders who are adaptable within this environment, and we also need to build learning that's adapted within this environment. So a program that is really well designed and well contextualised at the beginning of the program may not still be hitting the mark in 12 months' time in this very disruptive society. So we need to design programs that are able to adapt with both participants and businesses. We also know that unfortunately, despite an incredible amount of money being spent annually all around the world on leadership development, there is a large proportion of those programs that fail. So we want to be one of those organisations with programs that aren't succeeding. So why don't they succeed? Well, they don't consider the critical success factors of program development, and they are, as we've already gone through today, contextualisation, making sure that the program is contextualised for the organisation and for the individual. But we think it's critical not just to contextualise the program at the beginning of the program, but to have opportunity to recontextualise all the way through the program, and that's a real point of difference in our approach to leadership development. We also know that programs that are failing are often failing because they're not driving sustained behavioural change, and we want to drive behavioural change in our programs, and we know to do that we need to create a shift in mindset. And the shift in mindset that we're focusing on is building adaptive leaders that are able to adapt to and respond to their environment, collaborative leaders who are able to collaborate with other people to drive the results that they need, while also being practical so that they actually have the practical skills that are necessary to get the job done. We know that reflection is important, but exactly as Nigel said, how many of us actually take the time out to reflect? So we build reflection very much into our program, but it's a very specific and targeted reflection. We're reflecting on work, and this is where our cohort coaching comes in. I'll explain more about that later, but it's very important when we think of reflection that it is through work and it's not decoupled from work. And of course, to know if a program is successful, we need to measure it. We need to see some verifiable improvement. And when we design programs, we don't just want to see improvement at the end, we want to see verifiable improvement all the way through the program. So with only 5 minutes to talk you through what I think is a great program, I will dive right in and show you what our Enterprise Leadership Framework looks like. So, sorry the text is a bit small, but I'm going to say all of these words anyway. So we have 4 phases in our program, and we begin with an initiate phase, and that's where we actually come and work with the organisation that we're designing the program for in a really robust way. We take a design thinking approach, we run workshops not just with HR and L&D, but also with potential participants and executive. We ask to speak to people that like the program and those that perhaps aren't so sure about it yet. We want to know what's really going to hit the mark for the organisation. Now this part you may not think this is particularly new. All learning companies would do a consulting piece up front. What we do in this section is, I guess, come up with what's on the menu in terms of learning for that program to make it really hit the mark for that organisation. We know what a good program looks like in terms of good learning principles, neuroscience, in terms of the pillars that need to be there, the space in between components. But what we determine in this section is what's going to hit the mark for that organisation and really drive that leadership change. In the discover phase, that's where we start holding up the mirror for the leaders that are within the program. The typical components you would see in this phase are 360, behavioural-based 360. This is the point where we really start to demonstrate that executive level support. So we really make sure that the executive support for this program is evident right from the beginning. That may be through videos, it may be through presentations, depending on what's going to work for that organisation. This is where we really start to ask participants to think about themselves and have some of that self-awareness. But the ACT phase is where the rubber really hits the road, if you like. So this is where we start to bring participants together. We do start with a one-day workshop, and we do think that's a pillar of the program, because it's important. If we're going to build adaptive, collaborative, networked leaders, we need to bring them together at some point. This is also where we start to unpack the next components of the program. This ACT phase has two themes, if you like, and the first theme is the practical skill development, and this is where we start with the real personalised learning journey. So within this ACT phase, participants create their own individual learning plan or personal mastery plan, as we like to call it. This is where they identify the sorts of practical skills that they're going to be working on within the breadth of this program. And by practical skills, I mean, we all know that leaders, or all of us, are probably guilty of this. We often progress through the ranks of an organisation. We get to a certain point, and there may be some particular skill gaps that we haven't plugged along the way. Maybe not through any fault of our own, but just through the pace that we've been accelerated. So this is the opportunity for participants to really plug those gaps. So it might be reading financial reports, it might be conducting a performance review. This is where we also really individualise the learning journey. So we create or curate content at this point and provide it to individuals to help with their learning journey. The second theme of the ACT phase is where we really start focusing on that mindset shift, the behavioural change. So this is the adaptive mindset and the collaborative approach to leadership. This is where the cohort coaching comes in. The cohort coaching, a bit different to group coaching. We have 6 participants in the room, 2 coaches in the room, and we really focus on behavioural development as applied to a problem that is currently being faced in the workplace. So each participant will have the results of their 360. They'll understand the perceptions of their behaviour in the workplace. And then we unpack that with the participant and with the help of all the other people in the room. Think about, okay, what is an immediate problem you're facing in the workplace? How can we come up with a plan for you to resolve that problem, and taking into consideration the behavioural changes that you may be aiming for. So what we do there is plan, experiment, if you like, in the workplace for some of those behavioural changes. We have some very targeted reflection, or we like to call it weekly coffee with self. And for some organisations, we even provide the coffee vouchers, if that's what it's going to take for people to go out and spend 10 minutes with themselves just to think, and then come back into the cohort coaching group and report back on how things have gone. We know behaviour is not going to change in one session, so then we revise the plan and we do the cycle again. And this is where we see the cycle of behaviour change or reinforcement, repetition. So at the end of this, about 6 months, we're starting to see leaders who have plugged their practical skill gaps, starting to or have changed their behaviours, and are really at that point of maturity in the group that we can start looking at the embed or strategic mastery. So this is where we take all of those skills and knowledge and we start to focus it on organisation-wide problems, wicked problems if you like. So different than the old action learning plans, this is where we look at a problem across an organisation which is maybe solvable, maybe not, maybe we need to learn how to work through the problem. We bring people together to try and solve those problems. There's also a number of other collaboration activities within that embed phase, which we know from experience continue beyond the end of this formal program. So we see participants moving from self-awareness through to interpersonal mastery, and that's where they're understanding impact of self on others and also how to support other people in the organisation in a collaborative approach. And then we move on to strategic mastery. So we're seeing some real results for the organisation in that component, but certainly all the way along in the program. So how do we support it? It all sits very, very neatly in our digital environment, which we like to call high tech, high touch. Each learner has their own logon, but within that digital environment, they can see their own unique learning journey and the content that they're focusing on, the groups that they're involved in. So it doesn't feel like lots of little different bits of a puzzle. We pull it together very seamlessly. And of course, there's plenty of opportunity along the way to collect evidence which can be used for the DeakinDigital leadership credentials, and we can help with that as well. If people are interested in that, we can help them in the right direction. So there's a lot more detail that I could go into, and I would love to go into it if anyone's interested. Please feel free to contact me or anyone at Deakin Prime. But for the 5 minutes we've got today, I think that's a good enough overview. So thank you.
Thanks. I'll just ask our panellists to come up to the stage, please. I did have I was planning to ask each of them a question myself, but we were probably a little bit optimistic in thinking that with such experts with such great things to say, that we're going to get this through that a little bit quicker than what we thought. So I will open questions up to the audience, and I'll ask mine if we don't have any more. But has anyone got a question for any of the panelists? Yes.
Nigel, this is one for you. I'm Darren from Evidencebased. Hi. Nigel, you talked before about leadership at a CEO level, the practicalities of that. The people at that C-suite level are often very agile, they're fast-moving. You then talk about the fact that it's the ideology that's behind leadership theory. So don't you then create an ideologue, almost?
Not necessarily. No, I don't think so. I actually think that if you get C-suite people as conscious leaders and focusing a little part of their week on being better at being leaders, I don't think that turns them into ideologues or into people who trot out formulae. I think it turns them into thinking conscious leaders, and that is what we want. The problem is that if you're in the C-suite, the demands of the job give you very little room to really think too much about your leadership. So to be given permission to think about your leadership, to reflect on it, I think is a good thing. And if you think that creates, because you're putting frameworks and getting people to maybe absorb a little bit of theory in that process, that will turn them into ideas. You could be right, but in my experience, that's not true.
So it's that reflection.
Exactly. It's that ability to think about what you're doing and to have an agenda, a personal agenda of doing what you do better. And that happens in other facets of the role, but it rarely happens in the leadership element of the role.
More questions?
My name is Kyla, I'm from the company Health Checks. To me, a lot of the stuff that's coming up here and what we're doing in our company is gamification by the digital platform, and it really is about bringing communities together. It's about daily mindfulness and instant rewards for taking that reflection and doing stuff with it after the topics of learning, and really making it measurable and capturing all the daily measurements behind it, not just the big measurements, the 360 degree at the end of it. Have you explored that before?
Just to operate. Kevin Werbach from Wharton, who's Mr. Gamification. Kevin teaches, he's one of my faculty. I would be very embarrassed. He would kill me if I sat here and said, oh, no, I didn't talk about that. It's absolutely crucial. I think you've got to be careful with gamification because it can become trivialization. But if you build in an element of challenge, people tend to rise to challenges. So I think that it's part of a habit-forming process. Of, if you've got something knocking on your head saying do this, my watch is a habit-forming device. It's a gamified device. It gamifies my activity. It's telling me to stand. I've been sitting too long, so it's ordering me to stand. It gives me a report every day on how active I've been, how many active calories and however much you say, how stupid, you react to it, and you behave differently as a result of those little nudges. So now I think looking, say, at the Apple Watch's contribution to leadership behaviours is a massive area that we haven't even begun to think about. So you ain't seen nothing yet. I think there are going to be devices that will help us, and organisations can give cues to help people react in a way, and gamification is an integral part of that. So I think done well, you can't stop it. It's part of our lives now. Every time you give in your Qantas card to get your frequent flyer, you're in a gamified environment. You're being challenged to get to the next level, and you get rewards for getting to the next level. You can translate those things directly into behaviours inside the organisation.
The other thing about that is that how many people in here using gamification at the moment? Okay, I'm really surprised. Okay, so there's probably been, Zonify alone, if anyone knows that LMS, learning management system, that actually has gamification, there's probably been about $50 million worth of sales to Australian companies in the last 12 months alone. So 18 months ago, one large corporation chunked everything of its learning down into gamification. So micro-credentials are too big, but still can aggregate those micro-learning moments that people are taking in gamified environments and still tie them back to the evidence required to show the person's acquired capabilities. But they've done it when they want, how they want, in smaller chunks. And you can track it, see it, follow it, and see the behavioural changes even before necessarily they finish the whole program.
And I also think, obviously being adaptable to different programs and they're adaptable to different training platforms. It also, one of the things you raised earlier, which is the whole, how do you make it not just the 15 top people, but it's the 300 people. How do you scale to that level and still be able to get those people engaged? To me, it's amazing stuff.
Just one comment from my end. I feel sometimes that we need to take a step back and actually create the culture of accountability first for leadership development before we jump to the solution about creating convenience for how it's going to occur. I think gamification is amazing and it's really going to change, and it is changing how we do things. But I think we still, I did my PhD on leadership and I was doing my literature review and couldn't believe that decades and decades later we're still talking about what constitutes effective leadership because it's so hard to define. And I think it's really important to create accountability. That's really where behaviour change and new habits occur. So having line managers or whoever it is holding people to account for demonstrating those newly acquired skills, those new behaviours first, and then enabling that in a tech-driven way.
More questions?
If you can indulge me for a minute by introduction. Nigel, at the end of your presentation, you asked the audience if you could all name bad leaders. You've got, we talked about Martin Seligman earlier. Martin would have asked the opposite question. Think about the good leaders. Australia, on every global index, United Nations Development Index, the OECD Better Living Index, the HSBC State Living Index, the Livability of Cities Index is number 1. So over the 200 years or 50,000 years of human settlement, there's been a lot of good decisions. We've had a lot of good leaders in government, in business, in NGOs, in families, in individual decision making. But we seem compelled to run this negative rhetoric. So Melbourne University's Centre for Workplace Leadership recently produced a report, and the press releases were how dreadful Australian leadership is. I'm just wondering to the extent, and maybe questions to the CEO as well, that DeakinDigital and Deakin Prime can lead that positive vision that understands the positive elements of Australian leadership and makes that part of this training. But we don't have to talk people down into convincing them that they need to do courses. They need to do courses, they need to improve. But I think there's a positive rhetoric for change, not just this negative rhetoric that now imbues the Australian media, where every day we listen to the news, we read the newspapers, we think this was a third world country in which every one of us was at risk of being carjacked on the way home. Probably a bit too much rhetoric, but I'd love to see a positive side to this, not just the negative. We can think about bad leaders.
Can I pick up? If you read the book, which no one has done apart from me, I can say what I like. I won't prove you wrong. One of the things, the models that I suggest, is that when you start to think about leadership in organisations, if you envision a positive future, if you imagine how great the organisation should be, and build your leadership around moving towards that greatness, you're much better off than starting with saying, well, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. We'll focus on getting rid of the negative. So the kind of appreciative inquiry model, the research evidence, and it's not just me making it up, the research evidence suggests that you're much more likely to get a better organisation coming out of that than if you focus on eliminating the negative. So, and if everybody has a vision of how it might be in the future, you've got a much greater chance of alignment around moving towards it. So I absolutely buy that. And there is lots and lots of evidence that that model of focusing on the good things that you want to achieve, rather than only on how lousily we do it. But on the other hand, I think there's a myopia in organisations where they don't want, senior leadership don't want to realise just how miserable it is experiencing the organisation from the middle or the bottom of the place. And I think you've got to look it firmly in the eye, but once you've done that, you have a much more, well, I use that word, and maybe it's the wrong word, a happy vision of how this place could be really great and get everyone puzzled. So I buy exactly what you're saying, and I drink it in the soda and Kool-Aid as well.
My comment as CEO of Deakin Prime and DeakinDigital, the investments we're making around the leadership credentials, the investment we're making around the enterprise program, it's about lifting it to a new level. And for us, it's that constant striving to be better, to be excellent. And we think we've worked on things that are going to be able to elevate that. And so, yes, there are some challenges with what we've got, but how do we make it better? And that's the drive, if you like, behind what's happening with DeakinDigital. I don't know if anything else.
Probably only the point I was making as well is that all the negative rhetoric is about we have a problem. But Houston, we had a problem 20 years ago and we've been addressing that and putting together solutions. So the message about credentials is if you've got excellent solutions and excellent ways of moving forward, then actual credentials can now bring that inside the tent and work with you to do that. Because that's the solution that I've been looking for my corporate clients, to be able to deal with the culturally appropriate, contextually relevant leadership programs that still can be recognised with the currency of the day, which is the qualification, a macro credential.
Time for one more question. Have you got any final questions? I just want to close on for you, Marcus. In working with your current corporate clients, how do you see the lead credentials changing the way they approach leadership development within the organisation?
I think the most important thing is probably, let me give an example, and I have to tread very carefully because I'm sure this is next week you can record it and all the rest of it. Let's imagine there's a retailer, a very large one, that's struggling at the moment. And I was asked to reform their learning programs, and their major driver from the top was cost. And what we had to do was come up with a program that said, we already are complying with all of these university and vocational requirements that make us do these things. And for every dollar of funding, it costs us $3 to comply. Why don't we save money by getting rid of all of that and just deliver the program as we used to, that works for us, and put our brand on the piece of paper that they get, and say that's a wonderful way of moving forward. And my comment was, who else believes you're in the right place at this time to say that your people are the best leaders for everyone else to have once you leave, or that person leaves your organisation? And the answer for me was, why don't you do what you do, deliver the business outcomes and do all the things that you see value in, but put it under a credential model, so then your brand is about authenticating as an employer that you're getting what you want, but you've got it independently verified against a global standard that that person can take to any other workplace in the world. That to me was encapsulating the change that we're talking about with credentials. Program can be as best as you like, it can deliver fantastic business benefit. What's the employee value proposition that you're selling to that employee? So we try to, in actual fact, make sure that we're delivering business benefit and the individual has a portfolio of credentials that is incredibly valuable and the currency is known globally. If they want to cash it in for qualification, great. If they want to use it to say, I've done these things that exactly fits the profile of the job of the future you're looking for, fantastic. And we can recruit, select, find, run employment agencies, do data searches across boards. We even have Cisco people with a digital credential and a digital badge now on LinkedIn. Click on it, you'll see all the details of what they got, where they got it, how they got it, and if they wanted to, the people who assessed it. Now for an employer, university brand is great, and I won't deride the university brand, but who actually assessed it? What professor assessed it? Oh, and the industry person's a professor as well, but in actual fact has been running one of the largest startups in that area of innovation. We actually respect that assessment. It's not just the standard, it's the process. And it's digitally badged, recorded, and you carry it everywhere. Is that?
It's also incredibly reassuring that I want to know that my people are as competent as they can possibly be, and to have a reference point that says, measured out there, they're good. That's incredibly reassuring.
What's the value of the currency?
It's the value of the country, exactly.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. There's been a terrific discussion and sharing from our panel, so if we could please give them a final round of applause. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming. We appreciate your time is valuable and appreciate you spending it with us. Just one final one. Hopefully you've been, your curiosity has been piqued and you're intrigued about credentialing. We are running an event with Marcus on the 16th of September where Marcus is going to deep dive into credentials and the part they now play and share some findings from a white paper that will be released in the lead up to that event. So if you're interested, please go to the website and register for that event. Thanks very much. Have a great day.